guys, and welcome back to Phat Pack Magic. We've got a really interesting matchup for you guys today. Now, Vince is on the left playing Bant Company, which you saw in the previous video, and Dillon Peterson is on the right playing Green Stompy, which you saw in the previous video. Now, this is a really interesting matchup because both decks kind of operate in a similar space. They're both here to kind of gum up the board and use creatures for creature-based interaction against the opponent. Now, Dillon is going to be on the play. That 8 wasn't good enough for Vince to take the turn 1, so looks like they both decide to keep, and Dillon has a strong start with a turn 1 Llanowar Elves, but Vince, not to be outdone, does a turn 1 Elvish Mystic. Now, they always say one good elf deserves another, so let's see how they prioritize their ramp. Dillon, landing a forest, because that's awesome. He's deciding on whether or not he wants to make a play. He's got his hand on the button, turns, nope. He's gonna crash in with Llanowar Elves, and Vince values his Mystic more and decides to take the 1 point of damage as Dillon follows up with a Burning Tree Emissary into a Scavenging Ooze. Now, Dillon is sitting there with 5 power on the board, and it's turn 2, and Vince is taking 2 damage to play out what looks to be a Love-Struck Beast. Rather than going for the Heart's Desire sorcery, Vince just wants to drop down a Fatty Boom Batty 5/5 that's going to really clog up the board against Dillon. That Scavenging Ooze doesn't have any targets yet, but Dillon has a Nykthos and access to 5 mana on this turn. Using the Nykthos to add 4 mana with Devotion, and then 1 from the Llanowar Elves. And it looks like he's going to drop a Vivian Arcbow Ranger. And she's going to put 2 counter... No, she's going to have the Ooze fight the Mystic, kill it off, and pass the turn back. Now, the Love-Struck Beast can't attack because there isn't a 1/1 in play, but it can still block with the best of them, and next turn Dillon will have access to make his Ooze a 5/5. Vince deciding on his turn, and it's going to be Teferi, bouncing the Mystic back to the Llanowar Elves back to hand as Dillon exiles Vince's Mystic, putting a +1/+1 counter on the Ooze and making it a 3/3 and gaining Dillon a life. But next turn, oh wow, that's a Walking Ballista. That is one heck of a Walking Ballista right there, and Dillon has access to 6 mana because Nykthos counts Devotion, and Vivian Arcbow Ranger has 3 green pips on her side of the field. Now, question is if he wants to try and bait the block and the trade from the Love-Struck Beast and try and get Vince to save Teferi by putting 2 counters on the Ooze, or, and it looks like this is going to be the other option, he's just going to drop a Walking Ballista for 3. 6 mana going into the pool and making a giant ballista that's going to ping Teferi, kill it, and now Vivian is going to be able to pump up that ballista. Vivian goes up, but he's going to put the counters on the Scavenging Ooze, making it a 5/5 and a value trade target against the Love-Struck Beast. But the Love-Struck Beast can't attack yet. Now, it looks like Vince is deciding on how he wants to play out his turn. He's got a few options here. And the first one is going to be a Yavimaya Coast, dropping into a Deputy of Detention to exile that Walking Ballista. And now Walking Ballista is going to have to do some shooting or risk, it can go to the yard, and then the Ooze can eat it and become a 6/6. But right now, because it's not like if Dillon killed the Deputy of Detention, the Walking Ballista would come back because it wouldn't have any counters on it. But the Walking Ballista deals 2 damage to Vince, and Vince drops a Elvish Mystic, allowing the Love-Struck Beast to attack, and it crashes in at Vivian, offering the trade against the Scavenging Ooze. The Scavenging Ooze decides not to block, and Dillon draws another Arcbow Ranger. But this time he doesn't have access to a ton of mana because that Nykthos lost 3 green pips, and now Dillon is stuck with a 5/5 Scavenging Ooze and a 2/2 Bear. But let's be honest, that Scavenging Ooze is going to get bigger and faster pretty quick, as Dillon decides to activate Nykthos, adding a lot of green mana to his mana pool. Here comes a Llanowar Elf, an elf, and he's going to eat the other Walking Ballista for breakfast and put a counter on the Scavenging Ooze and gain another life as the Scavenging Ooze crashes in, dealing 6 damage to Vince, putting him down to 9. Vince decided that his Elvish Mystic was too important to throw in the way of that Scavenging Ooze. Now, Vince is kind of at a low total here. That Ooze is pretty strong, so he needs to figure out a way to deal with it. And a Deputy Detention off the top might be pretty good. It would reset the counters on the Ooze, but he doesn't seem to have drawn that for turn. Instead, he's going to put out a Tireless Tracker and play a land for turn, a Hollowed Fountain, which is going to shock him for 2 damage, and garner a clue token for Vince. Now, Vince is representing a Spell Queller here, as a untapped shock land might, be warrant for people to do. So Dillon is probably going to want to try and hold off on that Vivien. He plays his land for turn. Now, Vince would be able to double block with the Lovestruck Beast and the Elvish Mystic if he wanted to, and trade both of them. I kind of like maybe doing the Lovestruck Beast and the Deputy Detention, mainly because Deputy has nothing underneath it, so it dying doesn't really do much. But it looks like Dillon is offering up the Vivien Arcbow Ranger to the Spell Queller and gets tucked underneath and gives Vince a little bit more breathing room. But Dillon's got to follow up. Here's a few more, and it's Vivien, Champion of the Wilds. Now, he can now play his creatures as though he had Flash, and he's going to give the Scavenging Ooze a Vigilance and Reach ability rather than trying to dig for more cards to put underneath the Vivien. But if he did, the Vivien would probably just die to the Spell Queller on the backswing, and then that card would just be lost underneath it. Dillon swings in for 6 with that Scavenging Ooze, keeping everything back. He's at a healthy 22 life, but he can start maybe... Now, is Vince going to chump block? No, he's going to block with the Lovestruck Beast and the Deputy of Detention. Maybe? Possibly? Dillon is out of cards in hand, so there's no tricks to play around. Here you go. Lovestruck Beast and Deputy of Detention. And this is going to clear out the 2 fatties on the board. Lovestruck Beast dies. Scavenging Ooze dies. And now, Vince is able to start utilizing his flyer. But more importantly, he's going to start being able to use that Tireless Tracker to start garnering some more card advantage. Vince going over his cards in hand. He has a Selfless Spirit, which would be clutch against some of the Viviens and some of the fight creatures that Dillon is hiding in his deck, which he hasn't seen so far. But cracks a clue token and gets a land, plays a land, gets another clue token, and then plays out Selfless Spirit. And now the Spell Queller and the team are all going in, but the question is where? And they're all swinging in at Vivien. And Dillon says, that's fine. Vivien was probably going to get hit anyways. I'm not trading any of my creatures because I need their pips. But Dillon has drawn another land, and that's just not going to help him right now. Vince still has to play pretty carefully because Dillon can just top deck something amazing. I mean, Vivien Arcbow Ranger or Voracious Hydra are all incredible threats that would really decimate Vince's board right now. But he plays a land, gets another token off the Tireless Tracker. Looks like he's going to crack the token. Or maybe save it for some tricks. He's going to play out a Scavenging Ooze and another Llanowar Elves and crash in for 4 in the air. Now, unfortunately, Dillon can't block, so he just takes 4, goes down to 18. Vince is still having to play a little bit of defense here, not wanting to just get blown out by an overrun style effect. But Dillon has found a Vivian Arcbow Ranger. And now Vince is going to draw a card off the clue token. Dillon says, what is it? Is it Spell Queller? It's Spell Queller. And the Vivian gets tucked underneath. This is Bant Company, folks. Tiny little incremental advantages of tempo that just ruins the green player's day. Now Vince untaps, goes to his turn. He's got the board all cluttered up with flyers, oozes, trackers, elves, and one little Vidalcan wizard just kind of hanging out there doing his 1-3 thing. But here comes Teferi Time Reveler, and Teferi is gonna do some nefarious Teferi stuff. He's trying to be clever with that. But he crashes in at Dillon, bringing him down to 12. And now, -3, bounces the Spell Queller to hand, and the Vivian Arcbow Ranger remains exiled forever because Teferi says each opponent can only cast spells at any time they can cast a sorcery. Basically when the stack is empty, and the stack is the stack is empty, but it's not Dillon's turn. So Vivian stays in exile, and Dillon stays in sadness. But now, Vince has a Spell Queller in hand to try and gum up anything that Dillon might put out, 4 mana cost or less. But unfortunately, now that's a maybe? It's Nissa Who Shakes the World. But Vince is down to 7 life, so it could be pivotal here. Dillon plays out Nissa Who Shakes the World, and he's gonna untap a land which has haste and vigilance. Just trying to get a few more blockers and hopefully survive this series of flying onslaughts. Dillon passes the turn back, and looks like in a turn, that Scavenging Ooze is going to eat 2 creatures and gain... No, it's going to eat 3 creatures and gain Dillon... Or, excuse me, 2 creatures. I thought he was exiling another Llanowar Elves. So, it's going to eat 2 creatures and gain Vince 2 life, putting him up to 9, and end of turn, Spell Queller. I think Vince has the proper field here to do some lethal. But he's not taking any chances. He's crashing in for 6 and killing off Nissa. He says, I have a turn, but here's another Tireless Tracker to come on down. And unfortunately, Dillon only drew a Elvish Mystic for the turn. He's got a lot of lands and a lot of mystics. And now Vince playing the signature card of his deck, Collected Company. And it looks like he's got 2 more flyers to add to the board. More flyers than Dillon can handle, and more attackers than Dillon can keep up with. And game 1 goes to Vince. Bant Company, guys. This deck is for reals. I love it. But we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Hey guys, I want to give a quick shout out here to Your Playmat. These guys offer fully customizable playmats, card sleeves, and foiled playmats. Now, I wouldn't be talking to you guys about these mats unless I personally believed in them. So check this out. Yeah, that is the Mox Jet Altar on the Phat Pack Magic draft videos, and we put that on a mat. And here's the best part. Your playmat believes in me and believes in my channel and therefore believes in you guys. So that's why they're doing a special discount code only for Phat Pack Magic YouTube subscribers. Put in the code PPM15 and get 15% off any playmat you order. Foil, regular, anything you're looking for. PPM15. So what are you guys waiting for? Go make your own mats and show off your style. And we're back. Both players are shuffling up, getting ready to draw out their opening 7. Vince leads 1-0 against Dillon, and I think Dillon's game plan has to be to find more creature interaction, because the previous game, he had all the mana and nothing to do with it. He needed a Voracious Hydra, he needed a Walking Ballista, but both players are deciding to keep, and Dillon is going to start off with a turn 1 Elvish Mystic. Vince doesn't seem like he's going to let that go uncountered, because he's going to take 2 life with an untapped Temple Garden and play out his own Llanowar Elves before passing back the turn to Dillon. Dillon draws for turn, Nissa Who Shakes the World, and he plays out another land, tapping 2, and here's a Burning Tree Emissary, adding red-green, and then into a Jadelight Ranger, which is going to draw him a land off the top and reveal a Gilded Goose, and put a +1/+1 counter on that Jadelight Ranger. Now, Vince doesn't seem too happy about that 6 power on Dillon's side of the board, and he's got to figure out a way to catch up. So he taps 2, 3, and he's got Deputy of Detention queued up. Question is, what is it going to hit? I like taking the Jade Light Ranger here, though, because he can block the Burning Tree, but still, if that Deputy dies, that's going to be 2 more cards off the top for Dillon. Dillon draws that Gilded Goose, plays a land for turn, and it looks like he's got the Voracious Hydra. Now, if he swings in and Vince blocks, he can play the Hydra for 2 and chomp the Deputy and bring back the Jade Light Ranger. But that seems kind of like a waste for a Hydra. But here it goes. He crashes in. Vince decides not to take the bait, instead going down to 16. And Dillon follows up with a Jade Light Ranger, revealing a land, and then a Vivian Arcbow Ranger off the top, putting another +1/+1 counter on that Jade Light Ranger and drawing him another card. He follows that up with tapping the Mystic for mana and playing out a Gilded Goose. His side of the board is really thick here, almost running out of room for all the creatures he wants to play. But Vince taps 4. He's seeing that Vivian Arcbow Ranger. He's got to answer it with something. And it looks like he's got his own Vivian. And she comes down, and I don't think there's much for the Deputy of Detention to fight right now. So it looks like he's just going to put 2 counters on the Deputy. Yep, 2 counters on the Deputy, making it a profitable block at a 3/5 creature. But Dillon, I mean, he could swing in, trade the Jade Light for the Deputy, then use his Vivian to kill off the Deputy. That doesn't seem like a really good attack here. But it seems like he's got something else in mind. He'll just be lining up his cards, getting ready for a play. What do you got for us, Dillon? He taps 4, and that's going to filter into the Castle Garenbrig, adding 6, 7 mana to his mana pool. Ooh, I like this play. Voracious Hydra comes down as a 5/6 creature that's fat enough to chomp up that Deputy of Detention. Vince lets it go to the graveyard. He's got no other choice, but the Jade Light Ranger comes back in, and that ETB ability is going to reveal another Vivian Arcbow Ranger off the top and make it a 4/3 beater. Now Dillon goes to combat, swinging in, killing off that Vivian Arcbow on Vince's side of the board, and Vince has to follow up with something. He's under a lot of pressure right now. A 5/6 beast with trample, and then facing down a 4/3, a 3/2, and a 2/2 bear. And all he has right now is a lone Llanowar Elves. Not so alone anymore because he taps to play out another Llanowar Elves. But he's going to use the Lovestruck Beast, send it on an adventure, and then play it as a regular 5/5 just to get more creatures on the board. He passes the turn back to Dillon, and that Lovestruck Beast would be able to trade for the Hydra, but Dillon has a Vivian Arcbow Ranger, which he's preparing to deploy. The Vivian comes down, and he's going to have that Hydra deal 5 damage to the Lovestruck Beast, and now combat time. Here's 3, 4, 5, 10, 14 damage coming in at Vince. Oh man, and 5 of it's trample. So Vince, doing the math, he's gonna chump block one of the Jade Light Rangers and the Hydra. However, Vivian has a very, very relevant clause of text here. The creature doesn't fight. The creature just deals damage to another creature or planeswalker. So Vince is gonna end up taking 5, 10 damage, bringing him down to 6, losing the 1/1 human token to chump block for the Jade Light Ranger. And it looks like he's in dire straits here. He needs a Collected Company, but the company did not get drawn. And that's the thing is, Vince is at 6, but he just needs to live until he can get a really profitable collected company, and he can turn this game around. He's got a tireless tracker. He's got a deputy of detention that could eat 2 of the Jade Light Rangers, but still, Vivian would be able to +1 and put 2 counters on the Hydra, which has trample. And that trample clause is incredibly relevant because even if Vince was able to kind of survive the onslaught of using the deputy of detention to block the Voracious Hydra, it would still put 2 J-Light Rangers back into play on Dillon's side of the board, garnering him a possible 4 cards off the top. But he plays it out, puts the 2 J-Light Rangers underneath. It's the best he can do. He can try and absorb 3 of the 5 damage, chump block 1 of the bears. But Dillon draws. Dillon says he's gonna plus on Vivian, and Vince realizes that Dillon has another one in hand, and that is game win for Dillon, and we are gonna move on to game 3. And we're on to game 3. Both Vince and Dillon are tied at 1-1. The winner of this game is going to take the match and enter into the final round, where they will be playing for over $100 in store credit. Yeah, you heard me right, over $100 in store credit, because Darkside Games hosts the largest F&M event in the city, the largest Pioneer, and we're on Vince. He's on the play, and he's going to start off with the Botanical Sanctum into a Llanowar Elves and pass the turn back. Dillon on the draw. Looks like he's got a forest, and not to be outdone, he plays his own Llanowar Elves and passes the turn back. Unfortunately, Vince has a bunch of check lands and no shock land to go with it, so that Sunpetal Grove is going to enter tapped as he passes the turn back to Dillon. Dillon looks like a nice little Nykthos draw for turn, but the question is, does he want to save that Llanowar Elves, or does he want to start getting in the damage? He swings in. Vince takes the block. Both elves go to the yard, but Dillon's got a Burning Tree Emissary, adding red and green, and playing out an Elvish Mystic before passing the turn back to Vince. Vince draws another check land, but he's got the Botanical Sanctum to play in as well, and holding up 3 mana is incredibly dangerous for any player that has played against Bant Company. He's signaling he's got a Spell Queller in hand, and Dillon may not want to check into it. So he's deciding on whether or not he wants to swing, or if he wants to start getting in the game early. But here's a Nykthos' land for turn. Dillon has access to 4 mana. Unfortunately, Nykthos doesn't have enough pips to make it really profitable at the moment. So he's going to swing in. Vince says no blocks, takes it, goes to 18. Dillon, second main phase. Now he can't just run afraid of that Spell Queller for his entire life. So he's either got to take the chance or try and bluff something underneath it. Dillon really in the tank here. Does he want to throw out something and just kind of get it out of the way and let the Spell Queller eat it? Or is he going to just pass the turn? He's really thinking here. He just goes and passes the turn, but Vince plays out the Spell Queller anyway. Yep, he's got it. And now it's going to start doing some attacking. But his draw for turn is a Lovestruck Beast. And again, no mana untapped. But he swings in for 2 at Dillon. Dillon goes down to 18 and passes the turn back. Dillon draws a Nissa Worldwaker as his land for turn. Or his card for turn. And Nissa is... she's strong, especially with that Nykthos there, just making infinite mana. But he starts swinging in, bringing the Burning Tree Emissary to Vince's face, bringing him down to 16. Now, even 3 mana untapped, it's still representing, you know, a Spell Queller. But Dillon's going to tap 4, and he's going to offer a Voracious Hydra that's going to come in as a 2/3. And instead, he's just going to double the counters on it, make it a 4/5. Vince says, yep, that's fine. But Vince has drawn a tireless tracker. But it looks like he's going to play that Selfless Spirit for turn as on his turn and pass the turn back. Now, Selfless Spirit is incredibly strong in Vince's deck, just being able to keep those Deputy of Detention and Spell Quellers alive against removal. But it's also a 2/1 flyer. Dillon really thinking here. I mean, he's got a lot of trouble because he doesn't know if Vince has counter magic in his deck. Does he want to play into it? Or he has a dominating board presence right now with 6 power and toughness, 7 if you count the elf. But he's also got that Nykthos, and that's going to add 5 mana to his mana pool. And then, his land for turn is another Nykthos. And he's going to filter that in to add another 5 to his mana pool, totaling up 8 mana. And what is he going to go for? He's got all the mana in the world. Is it going to be a giant Hydra? Here's 4. Vivian Arcbow Ranger is going to immediately get Dovin's vetoed because of just how insane she is. But he's got a follow-up. It's a Nissa who shakes the world. Vince can't counter that. And immediately, she's going to untap a land, put 3 counters on it, and swing at Vince for 7 damage, bringing him down to 9. Vince is definitely on the back foot here. He needs something big. He needs something to clear out that Planeswalker, and he needs something that's going to be able to block that Hydra. Now, fortunately, Vince has a Lovestruck Beast, but he's going to crash in for 4 damage at Nissa, who shakes the world. And then, he's also got that Tireless Tracker he can start going. But nope, he's going to Elvish Mystic, Lovestruck Beast, and make a 1/1 blocker. Now, that Lovestruck Beast is a 5/5, meaning if Dillon doesn't have a way to pump it, or doesn't have a way to pump that Hydra, that Lovestruck Beast is going to be on awesome blocking duty and really stymie Dillon's presence here. Especially because those 2 flyers are going to be able to get in there unabated by Dillon's ground team, and he just might lose Nissa this turn. It doesn't look like he has any profitable attacks. And unfortunately, he's got plenty of mana with Nykthos. Tons of mana with Nykthos, but nothing to do with it. Yeah, he's got 8 from Nissa, and then another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with Nykthos. He's got a lot of mana. He's got a lot of mana. But here he goes, adding 8 with Nykthos. And here's a Whisperwood Elemental. Now, it's a 4/4, so it's not going to be able to get past that Lovestruck Beast, but it's definitely going to be able to gum up the board with 2/2 creatures that come off the top and manifest, and he'll be able to cast them for their CMC as a flip. And that's basically just drawing him a card every turn. So, end of turn, manifest a 2/2 creature. But still, it's not enough to block those flying brigade as Vince. He kind of has to kill Nissa this turn. He can't risk Dillon's top decks. So Nissa goes to the yard, and Vince plays a Tireless Tracker, which gets him a clue token. Now he's going to be able to start drawing cards, and that's incredibly dangerous. Dillon draws a Burning Tree Emissary as his draw for the turn. Now the question is, he's drawing 2 cards a turn with that Whisperwood Elemental, but are they good? Ends a turn. Here comes another 2/2. Now, unfortunately, Dillon doesn't have the option of a profitable attack. And end a turn. Vince cracks a clue token, draws a card, puts a counter on the Tireless Tracker, and all those land drops just suddenly become cards in hand. Now Vince is able to start doing the offensive, and he decides to crash in for a measly 2 damage, bringing Dillon down to 16, and plays another Selfless Spirit. The Flying Brigade is here, 6 power and toughness in the air, and Dillon is on the clock. Dillon draws for turn. It's a land. That's not what he wants to see. But instead he just manifests a Gilded Goose, and that Gilded Goose is going to do some work because Dillon has tons of mana, and he can just keep making food tokens every turn, gaining 3 life, and dealing half the damage that Vince would deal, or healing half the damage that Vince would deal with food tokens, giving him just a little bit more time. Unfortunately, an Aether Gust sweeps away the Whisperwood Elemental to the bottom of his deck, meaning no more Manifest cards, and Vince is just drawing lands and cracking clue tokens, putting counters on the Tireless Tracker, making it a 5/4. And I mean, he's in a safe spot here. He definitely needs to get rid of that Gilded Goose or just power through it with more flyers. But he's not too safe, because if Dillon draws a fat, voracious Hydra, that's going to be a lot of trouble because of all that trample damage. End of turn. Dillon takes 2 damage, heals for 3 with the food token, bringing him back up to 17. Vince has swung in with 1 Selfless Spirit, being very cautious in how he plays out this game. Dillon plays another Burning Tree Emissary, adding 2 mana, and decides he's going to cast that Elvish Mystic and pass the turn, slowly accumulating a ground force, hoping it'll be big enough to get through Vince's deck, or defensive line. But Vince draws a land, plays it, cracks a clue token, draws another card with that Tireless Tracker, making it a 6/5. Now it's able to eat through that Voracious Hydra, and slowly but surely, Dillon is losing his offensive edge here. And Vince has a Deputy of Detention. And it looks like that's going to start eating something. So Deputy of Detention, it's not going to exile the Burning Trees, it's going to go for the Goose instead. But in response, Dillon's going to add a ton of mana with Nykthos, make a food token, eat the food token, go back up to 20, and now Vince is able to do the offensive. He's counting up everything, still not sure, still kind of scared of the top of Dillon's deck, but only swings in for 2 with a Selfless Spirit, bringing Dillon down to 18. Dillon has another Llanowar Elf off the top, tons of mana dorks on both sides, but Vince, he's got that Flying Brigade. He draws for turn, crashes in for 4 damage with the 2 Selfless Spirits, bringing Dillon down to 14. And it looks like he's going to pass the turn back. And Dillon is just drawing lands and land accessories. Those mana dorks are not doing him any good now. He needs a Hydra. He needs a Ballista. He definitely needs a walking Ballista. But Vince draws a land for turn, plays it, gets a clue token, cracks a clue token, draws off the Tireless Tracker and puts another counter on it. That tracker's a 7/6 at the moment. Eventually, it's going to be too big for Dillon to block. Vince, still afraid of a giant Voracious Hydra or a walking Ballista. He's being very cautious with his attacks now, because a walking Ballista, it could just end the game right there. Because Dillon has 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pips. And 14, or 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. He can make a 9/9 Ballista. He has access to 18 mana. He could make a 9/9 Ballista and just fireball Vince's face for lethal. Vince is gotta be scared at the moment. He swings in for all 3 flyers, bringing Dillon down to 8. Dillon, another land. And he passes the turn. But here's an end of turn spell queller for Vince. That's 4 flyers in the air. That's enough for 8 damage. And that is the game, set, and match for Vince. and we are going to see Vince on the finals, and he is going to be playing against Rob Pisano, a local pro player, for over $100 in store credit. But that's it for us this time on Phat Pack Magic. Stay tuned though, because we got more F&M Pioneer, we've got Team Unified Pioneer coming, we've got more Vintage Cube coming, and I bought a couple boxes of Unhinged, so we'll do some unboxing videos. How about that? So make sure you tap that like button, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can see when I put up a new video on the dot, and check out some of the behind the scenes stuff on Instagram. And if you like these videos and you want to help support it, check out our links in the description below. But until next time, may all your packs be fat.